So here we have KK Downing, Ken Downing, to speak about Rocka Rolla. It
Hi,
was,
Sakis. It's nice to speak to you again, buddy. My old friend. It's been too long, so yeah, let's get stuck in the 50th anniversary, and
that
yeah,
was that was the
it,
year that I was born, and you were recording Rocka
yeah,
Rolla.
it seems like a lifetime ago because it was a lifetime ago. 50 years. I, I was just a young man.
And I really wonder how we can talk about this album and remember the details that I'm going to ask you, since for speaking for myself, I can't remember what I ate yesterday.
Yeah.
Let's see.
Well, this is the situation we're in because it was a long time ago. And so it's, but maybe if we can make a start, it might sort of
Yeah,
jog the memory a little bit. It's
let's do
difficult,
that. Let's do
you
that.
know, yeah.
First of all, how did you feel when you heard the news that the original Rocka Rolla multitracks had been rediscovered and would be remixed?
Well, yeah, it was really quite a special moment, I think, Sakis, because we thought that they were long gone, dead, buried, and we'd never see them again. Didn't know where they were, and after so many decades, So when this opportunity came about, um, obviously they found the tapes. They knew where the tapes was because the original owner of the original record company knew where they were. But then we were very concerned that they might be in very, very unusable condition. Um, but the good news was that the big multi-track tapes, 2-inch tapes, they they'd been stored away in a very good place, and so the guys were able to Tom Allom and the guys that were able to transfer from the tapes onto digital, which was good because people say that you can only play the tapes once, you know, and because if you tried, because every time you play old tapes, bits of the tape starts to fall off and things, and it deteriorates very, very quickly. So they were able to salvage the contents, um, on and put them into Pro Tools, and so it's there now for forevermore, which is very good because they're safe and uh, and it's wonderful for to have a sense of feeling that those records now again that that are a part of the band and we're a part of those albums once more,
And what made Tom Allom the right choice for these tasks? Because he knows exactly the Judas Priest sound.
Well, I think that um, we obviously worked with Tom more than we did any other producer, and we worked with Tom, you know, um, from British Steel onwards, and obviously that familiarity and friendship, and it just seemed that Tom was a producer from way back, in the days where we were recording on multi tracks, because Pro Tools and Cubase didn't exist then. That all of those component parts about Tom Allom seem to be make him absolutely the obvious choice to do it, you know. And of course, Tom, is kind of similar age to us, and mentally, we all have that knowledge and awareness and experience of working, with 2-inch tapes and those recordings, and so I think that the it seemed to make sense that the integrity of those recordings should be kept intact, rather than try to overly modernize, the recordings and everything, and to keep them sounding like classic recordings and classic albums. But at the same time, try to just refresh the whole thing and bring out, sonically different sounds and things that we're able to do now, and we probably would have done that then if we'd have had more time and money, but everything was restricted back in the day, especially, the time constraints, because studio time back in the day was like so expensive. It was mad. It was like £1,000 or £1,500 a day or something like that. It was crazy. That's still a lot of money today, isn't it? It's an
Yeah,
awful lot of money.
yeah, yeah. The thing is with that, if I remember well from previous interviews that you have done during the years, that the main problem with Rocka Rolla was the mastering of that album.
Yes.
So this remixed version have all the things that you wanted to do mastering wise?
Yeah, it does, because all through the recording process and the mixing process, the album sounded great and we enjoyed it. And, but like I say, it was after a very, very long session, 36-hour session to finish the album, because there was time constraints to deliver the record. And it was not a good idea to be able to finish the final mix and then straight away, because there was a little mixing room this was at Island Studios in London. There was a small mastering room upstairs, but so straight away after a very, very long session, feeling very tired and everything, and Roger, our producer, Roger Bain, went upstairs and mastered and cut the record, and he actually gave us some acetate copies, which is like a vinyl, except it's metal, mainly metal on the inside, and we went home and drove all the way up the motorway, miles away. When we got home, we played the record and it didn't sound good at all. So, but now we've got the opportunity to rectify that, obviously, and that's been done. And at the same time, bring out some more, flavors and little nuances. Like you can almost hear us breathing, while we're playing, and that's really, really cool. So I think it's a job well done. Like I said, the integrity of the record has definitely been kept but what needed to be done to it has been done.
Mm-hmm. So you already mentioned that Rocka Rolla was recorded on a very tight budget. What were some of the biggest challenges you faced during the sessions?
Well, the biggest challenge was really back in those days, we all had to play the songs together, the whole band, in the studio.
Live, yeah.
So that's what we did. And of course, if someone makes a mistake, then we have to start again.
And you don't have much of a time, because time is money, and you cannot afford to pay that.
So, but that went on. That same thing went on for quite a long time, really, quite a long time, right up until Painkiller, really. That sort of technique, it still went on. We would play pretty much the songs together, really at the time it wasn't a bad thing to do, because we always thought that it would capture the the band's kind of energy and feel as the band would be live, you know. But on the other hand, we were kind of so nervous and tense, trying not to make a mistake.
And it was your first time. It was your first time in studio.
Yeah, so sometimes, you know, we tried. It was hard to relax and try to just let it rip, but but it was a test and a trial. But obviously we were all really, really enjoying it and really enthusiastic about it. First time, you know, in a proper recording studio and where so many famous people had been before, you know, it was we felt very privileged to be able to be in those rooms, an environment where so many famous names, you know, in those early days, you know, we recorded in studios like Trident, Olympic, and Ireland, and places like Rockfield in Wales.
Yeah.
We went to Rockfield one time, and Queen had just left because they recorded Bohemian Rhapsody on the grand piano there. You know, so and my good mates Budgie, they recorded all of their early stuff there. You know, so it was great times. You know, we were very privileged, but for all intents and purposes, Ireland Recording Studio was very well equipped. It had all of the state of the art gear and everything. So really, it was the only real test to answer the question was us playing it as good as we could.
Is it true that you were recording at night?
Yeah, sessions would go on late and through the night. The last session definitely went all through the night. We started early and we finished about sometime like 6 or 7 o'clock in the early hours of the next day to try and get all of the mixes finished. So it was kind of tough because at some point you have to question your own ears. You know, are your ears working how they should be after, you know, such a long session?
Mm-hmm. And there were some. Were there any creative conflicts with Roger Bain, your producer, during the sessions, especially regarding the song selection and the arrangements? Because there have been...
No, everything went fine. Everything was smooth, you know, and because we also had Vic Smith, the engineer in the record, and he had worked, I believe, with Roger on some Sabbath stuff and different people, and they were a good team. But no, really, Roger was and Vic, they were good people to work with. They pretty much gave us quite a good free rein, you know, as to what we wanted to do musically. But you know, we had been doing a lot of gigs. We did quite a lot of gigs, you know, before recording the album. But like I say, back in the days when you played a live show, if you made a mistake, it was here and gone in a second. You know, it was gone. You know, and just in front of one audience. You know. Not like today with everyone recording on the phones and that. Like now, it's totally different because it's like being in the studio now. If you make a mistake, it's out there for a whole world to see. But back in the day, playing live was, you could kind of, how do they say, get away with murder. You know, it was all about just performing and throwing shapes and just being energetic and exciting, you know, and that would cover up a multitude of sins back in the day. But hopefully, I think that we played pretty good anyway, you know.
Mm-hmm. Did you feel that Rocka Rolla was a fair representation of the band's sound at that particular time?
the answer to that is yes, when we were recording it and playing it back, because we set up as though we were playing live, you know, so it did sound good. It was just as you said. It was just in the mastering, you know, which is absolutely critical because you've got all of these ability, you've got all these controls, you know, with compressors and limiters and EQ. And again, it's like another recording studio. It's another process for the finished sounds to go through. So it's absolutely critical to get it right, you know. And all of the mastering sessions that I've been in after that in my life, they're quite long sessions, you know. It can be, you know, a day or 2 or 3 days, you know, just getting the mastering exactly right, you know. So it's very, very important because a lot of things can change in the mastering.
This album leans towards blues, towards hard rock, even progressive rock, I could say. It's different than the classic Priest sound that the classic Judas Priest sound that we got used mostly in the 80s. Was this an intentional direction, or was it a result of external influences that you had?
Yeah, I think that it was just a natural process, really, the way it all came about. Everything evolves, literally. I mean, it was such exciting times. I'm so lucky, by the way. I'm absolutely blessed to have been born in 1951. And I have to say that because just as I was coming of age, you know, and started to have a bit of common sense and awareness, when I was kind of 13, 14, and 15, everything was happening musically, wasn't it? Everything, so much was happening, you know. You know, admittedly, a lot of it to start with was kind of on the pop front with the Beatles and so many other bands, but also we had coming along. Obviously, we had the blues movement with John Mayall's Blues Breakers and the Cream, and you know, and obviously the Rolling Stones, the Small Faces were great, the Trogs, the Pretty Things, them, and so many bands. And I was just like 14 years old or something, you know. And
couldn't digest everything.
It was so exciting because it was moving so fast. And then you know, when I was 16, I went to see Jimi Hendrix for the first time, and that was life changing. But everything was so exciting. There were so many bands, you know, all the progressive blues movement, Jethro Tull, Bloodwind Pig, 10 years after, Taste, Free. I mean, it was endless, endless. It was a wonderful, you know, but obviously me being and thinking the way that I was in my mind, you know, I was always into the more kind of moody, darker, you know. That's why I like the Rolling Stones early on, because they were kind of eclectic and kind of dark. Look, in the early days, you know, whenever you used to see them, yeah. But it was exciting times. But the evolution of what happened between the late '60s, especially, and the mid '70s, you know, Scorpions, UFO. There was so many. There was another side, obviously, Black Sabbath. There's so many other ingredients coming into play that wasn't blues, wasn't particularly progressive blues, but there was another different style, you know, which I was attracted to, which was more kind of riff orientated songs, as opposed to kind of 12 bars or something a bit more, you know, blues based, you know, because so many great bands were very much blues based, progressive, hence progressive blues, you know, Fleetwood Mac and so many bands that I've mentioned. But yeah, what was to become eventually heavy metal was actually there. It was prevalent in bands like Judas Priest, definitely Black Sabbath, and some other bands. You know, these ingredients were there. But the great Jimi Hendrix had some heavy metal in there. You know, Purple Haze and Foxy Lake. I mean, those songs were cutting edge metal as far as I was concerned.
Um, there have been some songs that came literally in the last minute, and these songs were rejected and then were part of Sad Wings of Destiny. How
Yeah.
different do you think Rocka Rolla would have been if those tracks had been included?
Well, it's a good question because when we put the album together, Rocka Rolla, we did have other songs and were playing other songs. But for some reason, I mean, there was a song, obviously, Victim of Changes, which originally
Was the Whiskey Woman song?
it was Whiskey Woman, you know, which was essentially myself and Alan Atkins. And we played that song with Al in the band. Of course we did, yeah. And we played it with Rob in the band, but it didn't appear on Rocka Rolla for whatever reason. But yeah, so it was a good thing to have some leftover music to continue the next album. But obviously, we were right up until Rocka Rolla, we were a four-piece band, me, Rob, Ian, and we were, as I said, a four-piece band, and so obviously Glenn joined the band just before we recorded Rocka Rolla, and so obviously with a new edition of Glenn was able to bring, you know, some good stuff and to be able to add to music we had left for Sad Wings of Destiny, and so that enables us to keep moving along quite quickly and produce a second record.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Rejecting, let's say, a song that you had been playing it live, like Whiskey Woman, do you think that was it a frustrating moment for you back then, or did it push the band to refine the song further and evolve it to the great Victim of Changes, one of the greatest heavy metal songs of all time?
Yeah, it's a good question because I think Whiskey Woman was, like I say, I've got live recordings of that when we did play it as a four-piece, and it sounded good, and it was, but exactly like we were talking, I have to really try and recall why it didn't make the first album. But I think, you know, Glenn had joined the band and we sat together and we wanted everything to be, you know, we wanted everybody to agree on everything. And I guess we went through that process really where everything was democratically put to the vote as to what we used and what we didn't, you know. So yeah, for the second album, we reworked that song, and obviously I'm still playing it now live,
Yeah.
and
It was for good. It was for good. It made one of the greatest heavy metal songs of all time. No doubt about that.
yeah.
You also have the song Caviar and Meths, which was meant to be a 14-minute epic song, and it was
Yeah.
reduced to just a short piece of a 2-minute
Yeah,
piece.
because Caviar and Mess, I've also got recordings of that. We used to play that, and I think I used to do a guitar solo in that song. You know, because back in the day, everybody just, Ian did a solo, the drummer did a solo, I did a solo. Every band kind of did that. Do you know what I mean? Just to show off their virtuosity. Hopefully, I can call it that. So that's what happened. But it all got kind of condensed down, and we just eventually used a musical part, I believe, from my guitar solo, and just put that on the song. But you know, who knows? maybe we might see the full version from KK's Priest soon.
Maybe soon. Okay, I get it. So you will use the rest 12 minutes, or it will be uh, uh, um, it will be made as a whole. We will have the whole 14-minute piece together in
Yeah, yeah.
in KK's Priest. Okay, okay.
Who
So
knows?
it will
We'll see.
finally, as it seems, it will
Yeah,
see
because
the light of day. Who
yeah.
knows? Who knows?
Well, I'm the man that can deliver that up.
Yeah. um,
I just have to turn the clock back,
yeah. It's
50
50
years
years.
or more,
It's
and
50
just
years.
put myself there, when we used to travel around and, you know, playing many shows with our good friends Budgie back in the day, and happy days, happy times. We were young, we were
And carefree.
broke, we were broke, but we had enthusiasm.
Speaking of that, the album reportedly sold only a few thousand copies, and you were broke, didn't have anything to eat. Did you worry about the
No,
future of the band at that
no,
point, or
we didn't we didn't have any money. Um, we didn't have any money. I didn't have. I bought my first old cheap £50 car that was very bad. When I was 27 years old. Up until I was 27, I used to either catch the bus, walk, or ride my bicycle. When I was 27, let me think, I was probably recording Stained Class
stained
by then or
glass? Yeah,
something.
stained glass should be. Yeah.
Stained Class. So I was still riding my bicycle.
Mm-hmm.
People, that's the way it is. But even when I was 27, I still didn't have any money.
Yeah.
I didn't have any money when I was 27, even though I had an old car. I couldn't really afford to run it. Um,
Did you worry
you
about
know,
the future of the band at that point?
sorry,
Did you worry about the future of the band at that point?
not really, because I had so much belief in the band. You know, I did believe in the band because I thought that by that time things had moved on quite a bit. I seem to think that around about then, Stained Class, I started to wear some leather and studs and things, and Rob quickly followed suit. Everything was always evolving with the band. We were always getting better and better. We were always improving. We were always, each record was kind of doing better than the one before, and we were with the great recording company Sony, who were always very good and supported the band. And obviously with Rob Halford in the band, as the first time I ever heard Rob sing, I thought that he was the best singer in the world, and and absolutely, and that was always in my mind, you know, to be able to have a band with myself and with everybody, all the ingredients of the band, and also have a singer like Rob. I always kind of thought that this band can't fail, can it? It can't really fail because I just had the belief in the band, and it's good to have that because it helps you. It doesn't matter what happens. It doesn't matter if you've got no money. It doesn't matter if you can't pay the bills. To have that belief is something to really hang on to.
Mm-hmm. That's great. That's great. Do you think that if it had the proper mastering, Rocka Rolla would have had a bigger impact on the band's career?
I think he definitely would have helped. I think he definitely would have helped.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, a lot. Um, because it almost seemed as though there was a perception that the album was impaired in some way, almost kind of faulty, you know, um, in respect of, uh, by comparison to other albums that were around at the time. I know that we certainly felt that.
Do you think that the struggles of with Rocka Rolla pushed the band to take a different approach on Sad Wings of Destiny?
Yeah, we still had lots of restrictions, really. I mean, we were still young and everything was new to us, recording studios and everything. You know, the main thing is that we were able to keep recording, but by the time we got to Sad Wings, you know, we, again, we went with the producers that, the record label suggested to us. We didn't really know any different. But we got on absolutely great with Max and Jeff. They were really, really good, talented guys, and even on that second album, Chris Tangarides, who was basically a tape op and used to make the coffees in those days, he came in and was there as well. He actually asked the boss of the studios if he could come in and work on the sessions with us because he could the studio and hear all of this crazy guitar work coming out. So yeah, but we were quite pleased with Sad Wings, I must say. We were quite happy with it, and I think it stood the test of time.
Yeah. So before the end, if you could send a message to your younger self in 1974, what advice would you give?
If I could send a message,
To your younger self?
well, I would just obviously, I think I did everything as good as I could. Um, but I certainly would say to myself that don't subject yourself to any proposed restrictions ever again, not when it comes to the music and the art and and to be fair to yourself, you know, looking back on it now, we should have said, no, this is not happening. We're not releasing this. It's got to be redone, but we didn't know. We didn't have the influence to be able to do that back in the days.
Yeah.
We were always kind of on a treadmill running and, seemingly we were always kind of chasing our tails, because of money and time restrictions.
Yeah.
But we learned later on why bands, when the more albums they do, the more time they spend doing it because they want to get it right. And it is a lengthy process. You cannot rush it. And you certainly cannot let it go and release anything if you're not exactly happy with it. That's my advice to all the guys listening out there. Be forewarned. Don't let it happen. Never let it go because you've got to live with it forever. And it's testimony, 50 years that I've had to live with Rocka Rolla. Don't make the mistakes.